Well, as my title today, Change in Channels, so I was thinking about all kinds of channels, but TV channels I was thinking about for a while, remembering my history with changing channels in TV. We've come a long way with these things, haven't we? How many of you have the rabbit ears? Yeah. And there was the one that was like a metallic one on the roof that we had a little thing we could done, and the thing would turn up on the roof. That was fun. It's amazing how things have shifted since then. These are some jokes from TV history, I guess, about channels. And remote control, these are quotes from people. Remote controls are quite handy. They let you see so much more quickly that there's nothing worth watching on TV. Somebody named Melanie Warren said that. Here's one from Alfred Hitchcock. Television is like the invention of indoor plumbing. It didn't change people's habits, it just kept them inside the house. That's kind of smart. Okay, cable TV is now evenly divided between shows about preparing food and shows about losing weight. Andy Horowitz. Jerry Seinfeld says, I will never understand why people love all these cooking shows. I can't smell it, can't eat it, can't taste it. The end of the show, they hold it up to the camera. Well, here it is. You can't have any. Goodbye. It's got a point there. Turned up the brightness control on my TV, but it didn't work. The show got even dumber. That was Greg Tamblyn. And Groucho Marx said, I find television very educational. Every time someone turns on the set, I go into the other room and read a book. Changing channels. How do we change the channels? It's kind of an interesting thing when you think about it. Looking in on different worlds, just change the channel and it's a whole different view. It could be a wonderful feast, dinner. It could be a beautiful nature scene. It could be horrible violence. It could be all kinds of things. So I'm kind of just thinking a lot about channels and what channels are. The word channel has a lot of meanings. It also means something that things flow through. It could be water, like the English Channel, a passage that water flows through, or that electricity flows through, or communication signals flow through, as with TV. So it's a channel. A lot of definitions for it. And we think of it in terms of people, too. There are people who are channels, or channelers, who have learned to be channels. Some very famous ones. I'm thinking of like Helen Schumann with A Course in Miracles. Anybody do any reading in A Course in Miracles? Powerful. Material flowing through her. I think that's the one that kind of made me a believer. I was initially kind of skeptical of channeled material, but there's some profound teachings that have come through people who are been able to kind of be open channels for wisdom to come through, for teachings to come through. Edgar Cayce, any Edgar Cayce fans? Sleeping Prophet. He was definitely a channel for especially healing wisdom. A lot of people still practice a lot of those Cayce remedies. He was unusual in that he was kind of asleep as it came through him, and he would just talk, and these healing remedies would come through him. Esther Hicks, Abraham teachings. How many of you dipped into those? Wonderful, profound teachings flowing through this woman named Esther Hicks, who channels what she talks about as higher intelligence, a group of entities that they refer to as Abraham teachings flowing through her. I believe that this is something that's really, we've all got some capability of it, not in the same degree, but we are all connected with something higher wisdom, higher selfhood, higher intelligence, and can be channels of that. And I think we get a little sense of that every time a kind of a divine idea pops in mind that we maybe didn't even know where that came from. A surprising insight or bit of guidance comes to us. Or in those moments sometimes in life when we find we're capable of doing more than we thought we ever could in a tough situation. Anyone ever have that feeling? Like, I don't know how I did that. I don't know how I got through that time. We can be channels for higher intelligence, higher strength, higher wisdom, divine ideas coming through us. Quakers call that an opening. We have had experiences of openings, I think all of us have. And I think channeling, being a channel, and teachings about being a channel are at the very heart of Christianity. No question about that. Jesus channeled the Spirit of God, the power of God, higher intelligence. And he said often that it wasn't he himself who did the work. It was the Father within. It was the power within flowing through that did the work. I of myself can do nothing, he said. He called that power a very, like Father, Abba, a very close connection to it. And he had a powerful ability to channel that healing energy that came through him. There's wonderful gospel stories about that. One of my, probably one of my favorite gospel stories is the one about the woman who had been suffering from hemorrhages for 12 years. And she'd been to doctor after doctor and had not been healed, and had gone through all her money, and she was desperate. And she heard about Jesus of Nazareth, who was doing his healing teaching ministry, traveling through the area, and she went in search of him, and she had this powerful feeling that if she could just touch his clothing, she'd be healed. And she found him and pushed through the crowds and touched him, touched his cloak or his clothing, and she immediately felt this energy flowing into her. She felt that she was healed. And here's the part that's interesting, showing that Jesus was aware of what a conduit for energy he was, what a channel he was. Immediately aware that power had gone forth from him, Jesus turned about in the crowd and said, "Who touched my clothes?" And the disciples said, "You see the crowd pressing in on you. How can you say, 'Who touched me?'" But he looked all around, and he knew power had flowed through him in a strong way. And the woman, knowing what had happened to her, told him the whole truth. And he said, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace." That's a story about faith, absolutely. But I think it's even more a powerful story about how one can be channel and how that works. This conduit of energy, of healing energy that Jesus had taken to such a strong degree, to be channels for that energy and power, that it's not us, there's something higher that can flow through us. "These works and greater works shall you do," Jesus said. He really was suggesting this same capability to be a channel of higher power and presence is possible for us all. He definitely taught it to his disciples, and they demonstrated the same capacity. There's wonderful stories in Acts about the disciples. This is after Jesus' death. And Peter and John are channeling in the same manner. There's a wonderful story about a healing at the gate of the temple. There's someone who's been lame since birth, requesting donations, alms. And they said, I have no silver or gold, but what I have I give you. In the name of the Christ, stand up and walk. And this gentleman was healed and walked and was giving praise to God, and everyone was astounded. And Peter said to the crowd, "Why do you wonder at this? Why do you stare at us as though by our own power or piety we had made him walk?" They knew it wasn't them. It was a channel they were channels for higher power. I think that's a real powerful teaching to bear in mind. And to me, it's one of those real barometers, a litmus test of whether there's real healing energy flowing through all of us. Are we taking credit for it, or are we aware it's not us, there's something higher flowing through? Because all the great healers have said, it's not I, it's not an ego thing, it's not me personally. There is a higher intelligence, a higher power that's flowing through me like a channel, like a conduit. How do we develop that ability more? That's what it causes me to think about. If we can all be channels, and there's sure a lot of suggestion that we can, that this is a capacity that's within our reach, and that we've all had a little bit of experience with in these moments of insight, these openings. How do we become channels? Because that's really the ultimate changing of channel in our lives. If we are getting a lot of static, if we're getting a lot of reception of stuff we don't want in our lives, and we really want to shift our perspective dramatically, That's the big one, is how to make ourselves a channel. That's the ultimate changing of channels. That's really going to bring us a whole new view of life. Well, I came up with a few ideas about this as I was reading through and scanning through all this information about channels and channeling and being a conduit. There's a word, Esther Hicks, one of those channelers of Abraham material, she talks about accessing Vortex. And I think that's something that's helpful to think about. I think it's one of the ways we do this. And Vortex is kind of one of those words, it means kind of a swirling energy, center of energy that kind of draws more energy into it. Or kind of a radiating center, swirling center of energy. Makes me think of, we went to Sedona years ago, and have you been to Sedona, Arizona, and they do these pink Jeep tours. You can go on Jeep tours, and rollicking things would almost bounce you to death in the Jeeps. And they take you around and they take you to the various vortexes. We went to one called Mystic Vista. Does that sound like a good place to go? Let's all go to Mystic Vista in our minds.
Was there a gift shop?
No, just a view. And apparently a sense of palpable energy. That's the idea with Vortex. There are different places that people have said they feel a real center of energy there. But they can be anywhere. There are vortexes everywhere. It isn't so much the geography, it's the state of consciousness. It's the state of consciousness, and maybe the geography becomes infected, kind of affected by that too. If there's a lot of history of people being in a certain consciousness in a place, maybe that builds in the place. I think that's certainly possible. But you don't have to be any particular spot to be in a vortex, and that's the way Esther Hicks is talking about it too. It's when you're in that zone of you feel energized. You feel enthusiastic, which is a wonderful word. The root of it is in theos, in God. You have a feeling you are really feeling your connection with power and presence, your God connection. You're enthusiastic, you're passionate, you're excited about something, you're engaged, you're in your power zone, you're where you're meant to be. And that could be all kinds of places. If you're a creative person, an artist, maybe it's when you're doing art, something like that. Or if you're a musician, maybe it's when you're making music and sharing it with others. Or maybe if I caught a story about Eddie Murphy recently on an interview, and he said for him, there's nothing better than making people laugh. Nothing better. That's the zone for him. That's the vortex. He's in it when he is making people laugh. So I think, to me, we become better channels for the energy of God, the creative energy of God, the life energy of God, when we are in those places where we feel our enthusiasm, when we feel our God connection. So I think that's helpful to me. I channel better this energy, this God energy in me, when I see to my vortex, when I'm in my vortex, when I seek out my vortex times and places, when I have that feeling. For me, often it's in nature in some way. I really feel my God connection more. Could be doing art. Could be any number of things. What is it for you? When do you feel most plugged into God in you? When do you feel most alive? That could be your vortex. That could be a center of energy that you really want to spend more time with and cultivate. So identify your vortex and visit it often. Sometimes we need help finding them. I think maybe we all do growing up, because one of the parental tasks that's most important is to help young ones find what is yours to do, how does the creative energy flow through you, what brings you alive, and find ways to cultivate that and make that happen. I was remembering again a wonderful story about Gillian Lynn, dancer, choreographer Gillian Lynn. She became very, very successful. She did the choreography for Cats and Phantom of the Opera and all that. She worked with Andrew Lloyd Webber. But as a little girl, she was a bad student in school. She was a fidgety, hyperactive kid, always getting in trouble at school because she couldn't pay attention. And her mother took her to the doctor when she was about 8. I might have told this story before because I think it's so delightful. And She's consulting with the doctor about this troublesome, hyperactive little girl. And the doctor says, I want to talk to you out in the hall for a minute or something. Leaves the little girl alone in the office. It's got kind of a beveled glass door on it. And his radio is on in there, and they notice through the door, the little girl just starts dancing with abandon all around the office, and is on the desk, and is just like, she was doing her own choreography at 8, this amazing vortex energy that she was caught up in. And the doctor turned to her mother and said, "You don't have a problem child, Mrs. Perks," or whatever her name was. "You have a dancer." You have a dancer, and get this little girl into dance school. And she did, and it could have gone another way, but this was a parent who was aware, this is how the creative energy is flowing through my daughter. This is something to honor. This is in God stuff. This is enthusiasm. This is energy. This is meant to be cultivated. And she did. And she became this world-famous choreographer and a storied career. I think she just died last year at a ripe old age, but an amazing career that easily could have not happened, but they found that vortex, that energy for her and how it flowed and nourished it and kept nourishing it and kept nourishing it and kept visiting it, and the energy grew and the opportunities arose. It draws more energy to it, like a vortex does. It draws more energy. It's like law of attraction we talk about in Unity. And you become a channel for this creative energy to flow through, as she did through all her shows, through all this dancing of cats and Phantoms of the Opera, the gifts it brings into the world. So kind of identify what are vortexes? What's your vortex? When do you feel plugged into source energy flowing strongly in you? And dive into that, cultivate that, spend time in it. Second one I think of in terms of becoming a better channel so that you can really change the channels in your life is to kind of go with the flow, learn to go with the flow, and to set aside the resistance. Find the flow instead. Esther Hicks, again, she talks about going downstream. Being downstream or heading downstream. In other words, not trying to fight the current. It made me think of an old teaching by Rabbi Rami Shapiro, and he talks about guidance and accessing guidance as a matter of feeling for the grain of the moment and going with it, not against it. Feeling for the grain of the moment and going with it. And that's exactly what Esther Hicks is talking about with going downstream. It's a teaching about non-resistance, I think. Dropping our resistance and our struggle and our insistence on calling the shots. This is the way it has to be. And if it's not going that way, we're agitated and we're resistant and we're pushing and we're fighting the current. We're not downstream. We are not going with the grain of the moment. And Jesus taught this strongly too. Teachings on non-resistance. Make haste to agree with your adversary. Find common agreement so you're not locked in discord and conflict. Forgive 70 times 7, so you don't stay locked in conflict, adversarial, opposition, resistance, fighting the current. No, you want to go downstream, as she puts it. You want to find flow and go with it, not against it. I was thinking of one of a person I admire so much who's doing such wonderful nature preserve work, Nancy Stranahan, with her wonderful Arc of Appalachia. I know some of you are familiar with the wonderful nature preserve area she's been building in southern Ohio for some years now, probably 25, 30 years now. But the way it started, I was kind of reviewing how that happened again, and an inspirational story. And it really kind of calls on these ideas of finding your vortex, and then finding a way to go with the flow so that you don't get locked in stress and resistance. It started out with, years and years ago, she heard that the 7 Caves resort area in southern Ohio, a lot of it was going to go for sale. 47 of the 60 acres. The guy who owned 7 caves. Any of you remember, you Ohioans remember 7 caves? Okay. It was, they had lit up the caves down there and you could go in there and there was a gift shop and so on. It's down in southern Ohio. And the owner of the business there wanted to keep his 13 acres for his business still for a while, but because business was down and he needed the money, he wanted to sell 47 acres of that lovely parcel of rocky streams and cliffs and ferns and trees. It's a gorgeous area of the state. And Nancy Stranion had been from that area and interested in nature. She had a senior naturalist job for ODNR, Department of Natural Resources, for some years. She tried to raise funds and tried to get one of the state or local organizations to purchase it, and she wanted to help them do that and would do some fundraising for them to try to get somebody to purchase that 47 acres so it wouldn't go to development. And she and some friends did fundraisers like selling baked goods and things like that for like a year, and they couldn't interest anyone in buying that wonderful property to preserve it from development. No luck. She wrote about it. She said, "We felt betrayed and disillusioned because we couldn't get anyone to purchase this land. And then we thought, why don't we buy it?" The idea sounded ridiculous, but we decided we could try. What did we have to lose? I think that was a decisive moment. They went from disillusionment, despair, anger, frustration. That's resistance. That's fighting the stream. And being angry that things are not going your way and you're not getting the flow that you want. But instead of that being the end of the story, it was like, okay, well, what can we do then? Could we do it? So with no experience in real estate or really fundraising or any of those kind of things, they kind of plunged in to the world of land acquisition, and they formed this thing called the Arc of Appalachia, a nonprofit, and started fundraising and started learning about acquiring real estate. And by '95, I guess it was, they raised enough money and awareness in the area to buy the 47 acres and allow the owner of Seven Caves to continue for a while. She said we agreed with a handshake. That's how it was done, and that was their first major purchase. So they have now over 7,000 acres that they put together down in southern Ohio. That was a decisive moment where they were like, okay, not resistance, not fighting, that approach didn't work, but now, what's the flow of the moment? What's the flow of the moment? I'm going to go with the stream. And the stream was, maybe this is for you to do. Maybe this is what's for you to do. Why not give that a try? And when we're going with the flow of the moment and we're sort of following guidance, it's amazing the cooperation we get from the universe. Have you had that experience? When you sort of find your guidance, it's like, I think this is mine to do. Even if it's kind of new for you and you're a little out of your comfort zone, but if you get the guidance like, I think this is mine to do, it's amazing the support that will arise, the resources that will suddenly become available to you, the people you'll meet with guidance you need. It's kind of amazing, that law of attraction at work. When we're heading downstream, the universe is going with us, and we're getting the propelling energy of it. So watch for that, and watch for the rapids, or those places where you're up against the rocks and there's resistance, and it's like, maybe I need to shift a little internally. How's the stream flowing right now? What's the grain of the moment? And begin to go with that, go downstream. So find our vortexes, our centers of energy and enthusiasm. Go with the stream, go with the flow. And the third one, and it's maybe just the ultimate one, is go directly to source. Regularly, routinely, hook up to source. Esther Hicks talks about source energy. Hook up with that. Cultivate it in a routine way in your life. One of my favorite New Thought writers, 20th century New Thought writers, was Joel Goldsmith. Anybody read any Joel Goldsmith? Practicing the presence was probably one of the big ones, and that's what he talks about. That's how he talks about going to source. He says, every person who has known dissatisfaction, incompleteness, and frustration will someday learn that there is only one missing link in their entire chain of harmonious living, the practice of the presence of God. The practice of the presence of God. It's something we can practice. It's something we practice. Certainly it's what Jesus taught. He told people not to worry about what they were going to eat or what they were going to wear. Don't worry about these outer details. Seek first the kingdom of God and its righteousness, and all the rest will be added. That's practice the presence. Connect with Source. And when you've got that God connection and you feel it, the details will take care of themselves. The guidance will come about what's yours to do and what's not yours to do. This sounds like, when we think about this, it sounds like kind of a passive thing, to become receptive, to spend time communing with God, to practice that presence, that connection with Source. But it's actually a very active thing. It stretches our language. I've always, like Emily Cady, struggled with this in talking about the power of prayer, practicing the presence. She said, dare we call it an active passivity? It's hard to describe what it is. It's cultivating a receptivity, I think. It's something we can cultivate. So it's something we do quite actively and intentionally, but it's not in a pushy ego way. It's not we're not going to manipulate or manufacture or make things happen. What we're going to activate is our divine connection and practice that routinely. It's something we can learn to do. All it takes is a little desire to kind of become more receptive, to manage our ego a little bit in our sense that it's all about us. We're doing it all. That's not how we channel higher intelligence. If we're thinking it's all about us, we're in the way of channeling higher intelligence. Channels are always open. They're conduits for this energy to flow through. So it's about cultivating our receptivity, managing our ego, practicing a little basic humility. It's not me doing the work, it's the power within, and tuning in regularly to higher selfhood, to higher intelligence in whatever way works for us. Daily prayer, meditation practice, sitting in silence, quiet walks, whatever works for you. Gratitude journals, any kind of journaling, I think, is a powerful way of tuning into Source, connecting with Source. What is it for you? What makes you feel like you are really connecting with Source and becoming every day more receptive to it and more in touch with it? That's what you want to do more and more of. That's the ultimate changing of channels. When we do that, I think Goldsmith is right. Sooner or later it comes down to that. There's a point in our lives where we realize, I've been just pushing too hard, I've been fighting the stream too much, I need higher help. Anyone been there? Higher help, please. Higher intelligence, higher wisdom, higher love, higher peace. And the way to cultivate that is to tune in and to connect up with that Source energy that's available to us all, God in us. I am a channel for higher power. That's my affirmation for the day, if you'd like to join me in it. I am a channel for higher power. Let's say that once again with conviction. I am a channel for higher power. Yeah, let's take that into prayer for a moment and affirm it again in the quiet of our minds and hearts. Taking that idea deeply within, every one of us can be a wide open channel for the flow of higher power, higher intelligence, higher wisdom, higher love, higher peace, a deep and abiding peace that can be with us through all circumstances, all challenges. That power and presence of God that is with each one of us unfailingly and ready to flow through us in fullness. We are wide open, we are ready to receive, and we are grateful. So it is. Amen.